A very good afternoon to everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on AI and tech governance from India's perspective. I am Triti Goyal, your host for the session today, and I would like to introduce DPO Club, which is a community of privacy and data protection professionals committed to advancing the conversation around data governance, compliance, and emerging technologies, bringing together experts, researchers, and practitioners to foster responsible innovation. Today's session aims to explore how India is shaping the governance of emerging technology, particularly artificial intelligence, and the regulatory, ethical, and policy framework guiding its digital future. We are honored to be joined by our distinguished speaker, Avik Sarkar, professor at ISB, known for his contribution to data governance and digital policy. Shreya Ramann from Council Select, who brings extensive expertise in privacy, compliance, and regulatory advisory. And Dhiraj Khare, a seasonal expert in technology governance and risk management. Guiding this discussion is our moderator, Colonel Koshy, whose leadership and expertise will help stir an engaging and insightful conversation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and a wonderful afternoon to all of you who are listening. And we are thankful to the august speakers who have actually volunteered to join in. And it is my privilege to lead, an IITN, NLU, and an IIM fraternity. I think I have never led such a wonderful August forum which is there. But then the topic is such that we really need the best in the industry to actually come and speak, because there's a lot of mist around AI, the way India is looking at the adoption of AI, the way there is regulations that are happening globally, the the aspects of irresponsible, I would rather like to call it, AI that is proliferating in terms of deep fake, cybercrime, and all that. So there's none better than what the forum that I have today. And as part of DPO Club, we are thankful to all the speakers who have come here. And I know that at the end of the session, this 1 hour session, will provide a good amount of value to the audience who are here. And Sarkar sir, I would like to start with you because you have been involved from the inception, and now you sit at an academia which is the most, you know, uh, volunteered and most dynamic one that is actually looking at AI. So I would like to start with you, and then probably you can introduce yourself for a minute, and then take up this question which I would like to ask you. Uh, in terms of AI regulations, governance, we have seen a plethora of regulations and documentations that is coming out in the open today. India per se has not brought out a regulation, yet there are large amount of guidelines. And the way Government of India, Ministry of IT has proposed to regulate AI without even coming out with a bill and in its form as like the EU or the other counterparts, we see that there is a lot of things that India has to take in. And I would request that you can throw some light as a prelude to this webinar, and then I will take the questions forward to the others, please.
Oh, thank you, Colonel Koshi. I think that's very good to start with some background on how the landscape of AI governance and regulations have progressed in the country in the recent years. So let me share my screen and take you to a small presentation, and to give you an overview of that, and where I will talk to you about why we need AI regulations as we are talking about it, and what the current landscape of AI regulation is. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, your scene is visible. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So basically, as you can see, AI regulations is and governance is what we are trying to do. And AI has been there for quite some time, as we know. In the recent 3-4 years since 2022, with the release of ChatGPT in the public domain, the awareness has grown quite a lot. But in the last decade also, we have seen a huge increase in the adoption of AI. And there are basically a lot of applications and domains which have started using AI in their business processes, in people in their daily lives. So when we are talking about an AI ecosystem, there are two aspects to it. And when we are talking about regulations or governance of AI, it's important to get a sense about which side of the ecosystem you are in. So there is one side which looks at the AI benefits, and these are primarily the people who are developed, say, the large language model or developed AI softwares and the packages that are there. Then there are the corporates who are using this and providing services on top of them, which are helping them for their productivity, helping them for the revenue gain, and a range of those things. And then underlying also, there is a huge effort that goes on in getting data that will train this AI. So I call them as a data curator. So this is a group which is more interested in the benefits of AI, about what AI can do for them. And the other side of this balance, as you can see, are the citizens who are the end users of the AI. For them, their personal data is being used. It can be my personal data of how I am browsing on the web, what I am posting, or what my details of ordering of food or cabs are. So a lot of data about me is there, which is basically help fuel a lot of this AI. So I am basically interested as a citizen about the data and privacy. And when I am an individual, my stance has to be taken by my government, because I can voice my point of view on some platform, but I cannot form regulations. I can be a part of the democratic process. So governments comes and plays an important role there, and government do this through regulations, and that is where the regulations and the governance part comes in there, because we are looking at the entire ecosystem, and there's different players in the ecosystem are there. So who are the different players in the ecosystem? The ecosystem consists of the technology players who are developing the technology, the citizens who are interested in the safety, the market, which is the business aspects, and the government who has to look into all of these aspects. Now, for I think the discussion around AI principles and stuff only started around 2015, 16, around that time. Before that, AI was used, but people never assumed that it is something that they need to worry and think about governing. So one of the first document that came in was an AI ethics from IEEE. But before we go into AI ethics to regulations, just want to make you understand that there are a range of steps that are there. So first is that people should be aware that there is a problem with the AI that they're using. So awareness is the first thing. From awareness come the principles. So now that we know that this is bad or good, what should be the principles to govern it or principles to regulate it? Then comes the technology readiness. Now we can agree that there is a principle that this should be done, but if there is no technology available to solve the problem, then we are still in that flux that, okay, we want to solve a problem in the real life, but we don't have technology to solve it. Then comes the legislation and the regulation. And this is more of the like passing a bill, passing a law, and that is something I expect other speakers also to throw a lot of light in the Indian context as we talk about it. So IEEE ethically aligned design was one of the first one which came around 2017, which came up with some principles. And this is like a very widely used document which came from IEEE because it's coming from the technical community. It talked about a range of about 8 broad areas, and I will just quickly talk through about one line about each of this. So they talked about human rights. So whenever we are talking about an automated element or an AI, it should honor the human rights that are there. It should be used for well-being. So these are all principles. It shouldn't be used for harm. It should be used for well-being. The data agency. Whenever we are using data for doing anything, that data should ensure all the privacy is taken care of. Effectiveness talks about that the algorithm that is being used is effective and free from biases. Transparency is something that we call in current terminology as explainability. If a system is taking a decision on behalf of AI, do we know transparently why those decisions have been taken? And that leads to the aspect of accountability. If an organization is running a system on AI, they should be accountable for what the impact that application causes. We should be also be aware of the awareness of the misuse. Like we see a lot of misuse happening, and you talked about the fake news or fake videos and stuff of that nature. Awareness of misuse. And the other thing that comes is the competence. Say today we are looking at cars that we drive on our own, but maybe 20 years down the line, self-driving cars will become a reality. But it shouldn't be the case that a person sitting on a car is not competent to take charge of the car in the absence. And that is, this competence applies for a judge when they are taking decisions. They should be competent to take the decision even without the AI in that place. A doctor should be competent to take the decision even without the AI. So that competence should be there for the person. Even though a lot of help can be derived from AI, the competence should be there. So IEEE came up with this principle, and then there were responsible AI principles that came out from range of bodies, international organizations. Very widely accepted ones are the ones from OECD and UNESCO. The one by UNESCO has been signed by 193 countries by principle, and the OECD was the basis on which the EU AI Act was formed. There are also international organizations like the BRICS and the WIPO, which came up with the responsible AI principles, and each focusing on one aspect of it. Around the same time, companies also came up with responsible AI principles, and many companies came up with responsible AI principles in the last 5 to 7 years. Also, countries came up with responsible AI principles, and from the principles, the next step comes is that are we going into the regulations part? And going directly to EU regulation, I'll just talk about it here because I'm sure in the next 1 hour we will get more time to go into the depth of it. In 2023 was a very landmark year because we saw the EU legislation which was passed in 2021 was adopted as a law in 2023, and which talks about the first comprehensive law that's binding AI. I'll not go into the details. It bans certain types of AI, and there are certain types of AI which has a very high risk. The next one, which is very prominent around the same time, is the NIST AI risk management framework, which came from the US standard setting body, which talks about mapping an AI application, measuring its risk, and then managing the risks. And this came out around January, February 2023. Around the same year in December, ISO, International Standards Organization, came up with an artificial intelligence management system, which is very widely known as ISO 42001. And this objective was to give a comprehensive certification on AI risk management, development, and deployment, on how an organization should approach it as it goes about doing it. A lot of responsibilities was on the organization. What is the commitment of the leadership? What the leadership should do when they are doing an impact assessment on AI application, how they are managing the data, and then having some key performance matrices. ISO 42001 is a very lengthy document, and I will just flash this. These are the broad areas that are where we talk about the policies an organization should adopt, the internal organization, the resources, the impact assessment. So the first part talks about the problem, and the second, Annex B, talks about the solution to this problem. Like, how do we solve this problem? And see, many of the things that we're talking about, like say data governance, the transparency, the use of AI, the third-party relationship, like if we're using a third-party vendor's application in your AI process, all these are taken care of. Quickly coming to the Indian context, India also has a long journey with responsible AI. And it came from the national strategy in 2018 to the responsible AI principles, which came out in 2020, and the approach document, which came out in 2021. The principles of AI, responsible AI for India, are no different from many of the other countries. We talk of very similar things like safety, reliability, equity, inclusivity, and many of those things that are there by many of the major players. then we see that in last year, in November, the METI passed the AI governance guidelines. Again, it is still a guideline. We don't have a law. It talks about trust, the people first. It talks about the aspect that innovation should not be hampered. Fairness and equity, which talks about effectiveness, accountability. Now, if you see something like the IEEE document which came out in 2017 and what we are talking today, the principles are still quite the same, around the same aspects. The people first talks about like well-being, if you remember from their trust, the human values. The way it wants to do it, the Indian government wants to do it, is by focusing on six aspects: the infrastructure, which is very important, having the compute, the capacity building, the policy, the risk mitigation, and we talked about two frameworks which are doing the risk mitigation, the one by NIST and one by ISO, the accountability, and then the having the adequate
Yes.
institutions to support it. Yes. Then we look into the AI governance group, technology committee. So these are the two committees that the government plans to set up in a hub and spoke manner, which say the METI as the hub of many of these. And AI Safety Institute is also is planned in India. That is a big thing. Like to end with that, while I summarize the thing, we are talking about AI, which is still at a very nascent phase. Like, say, the car that you see here, we don't see cars of this nature too much in the roads today, and the safety norms of automobile of this nature might be very limited. And we are still in that phase. If you remember, in way back in the 1865, when cars were just introduced, we had Locomotive Act in 1865, where there was a maximum speed limit of 4 miles per hour, and within the city it was 2 miles per hour, with a person requiring to run in front of the vehicle, ensuring the road is clear. Because we are talking of an ecosystem where the roads were made for pedestrians, and we today stay in a world where we are fine-tuned to think about things in a very deterministic manner. Whereas when we're looking into AI, we are moving from something which is deterministic to something which is undeterministic and probabilistic in nature. So we are still in that phase. And just say, if you look into seat belts in car, a very basic safety aspect that we look into, different countries had their different timelines for adopting the safety in car. Even though we know that it's mandatory, it's very, very important. Whereas we see that some countries adopted it in the 1960s, whereas other countries only did it around early 2000. So even if we all believe in principles that it should be done, the way when we start to regulate it and start taking active step also depends on many of the other elements, and we'll talk about it in the discussion, which then influences our decisions. So I will stop here
Yeah.
at this point, and then you can
Yeah.
take further questions from there.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Sarkar. That was a very exhaustive. Probably we should download your PPTs and then refer to it subsequently. Shreya, you come from a generation, which is the most avid of population that's adopting AI in that sense. And I come from the Ministry of IT. I was serving there as director. And I know that Government of India per se would not like to bring out the EU similar to what the EU Act is there. But then you being a law fraternity personnel, I would like to ask you, see, by virtue of just bringing out the India AI governance guidelines that came out in November 2025, the intent of the government was just to have a governance guidelines existing. Probably in the near future, one would not expect an AI act coming into India. Now, the reason for this is the fact that Government of India wants public to use the internet, use the AI as a platform for benefit. But then there is a balance between interest and, of course, the bad part of the AI. Now, do you think that the regulations that the AI guidelines that came in is enough, or do you, as young India, feel that there is more regulations and mandate that should come out, especially when it comes to responsible use of AI in India?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And thank you, Avik, for setting that context. I think it's really helped all of us answer our questions a lot more easily. But to your point, I mean, the guidelines that were released were more an approach for how the government is looking to regulate AI or looking at AI from that perspective, right? I don't think it was intended to be a regulation of AI in and of itself. I think what Avik pointed out in terms of how different countries are going at different paces and have done so with technology for many years is very, very important. And that context is how I view a lot of these measures and a lot of these policies that the government is coming out with, right? With the EU and their risk-based law, they are at a much more mature stage of legal evolution. But more importantly, the relative benefits that they are getting from AI are very marginal compared to what India can get from AI, right? For us, it's really transformational when it comes to going leaps and bounds ahead when it comes to healthcare, education, financial inclusion, which is exactly what you said, right? We want our people to use AI so that we can progress much faster than we otherwise would have, which is why the guidelines have stressed so much on innovation over restraint, which is, I don't think, something they've just said. It's a very, very intentional phrasing that is coming from a calculation of what our national priorities really are. So that's really the context with which I view every sort of move that the government is making when it comes to AI. Now, when we ask, does India need an AI law? I think that's maybe the wrong question to ask, and a lot of people are asking that question. It's more, what does responsible AI mean to India, right? What do we need to do to operationalize that? And is law the right instrument to operationalize that? That's kind of the framework that I use. And if we go through a little bit double clicking on what Avik has already touched on, I think what the guidelines do say is that existing laws already cover significant risks that can arise from AI. And while I completely agree, right, we have the DPDP Act coming in, we have consumer protection law, we have competition law, we have the IT Act, we even have sort of discrimination laws for things like bias and fairness. These exist, and I really think they should be relied on. But I would have two caveats there, right? One is, are these laws prepared for the consequences of AI? When we apply AI to existing frameworks, are those frameworks really holding up? And DPDPA is a great example, right? Does the right to erasure mean that we need to figure out model unlearning? These are questions that may not require new laws, but they require clarity and consensus on how existing frameworks will apply to AI. Unless we do that, I don't think it's helpful at all to say that no, existing laws exist. There is work to be done to figure out how they will apply to a new technology like AI. And the second very important caveat here is enforcement, right? We may have these laws. Are these laws being effectively enforced in the context of AI? Does our data protection board understand and have clarity over how to regulate personal data in the context of AI? And what does that enforcement look like? Because without that, these existing laws aren't going to have much teeth when it comes to AI, right? The second is these sectoral frameworks that we're seeing coming up. We're seeing RBI, we're seeing SEBI release guidelines and directions on how to use AI in those highly regulated sectors. And that, I think, is very organic and something I think is going to really work as opposed to an AI law. It's something we saw happen even when the data protection law was coming up, right? For the years that we didn't have a law, the RBI stepped in where it saw that there was risk. And today we see that financial sector companies are much more mature in thinking about data protection because of the guidelines that the RBI had put in, right? So we will see high risk sectors organically respond to AI risks. And I think that's the right way to go, right? That is sort of a much more contextual approach to this, which I think is what the government is really looking to do as well. The frameworks that Avik also touched on, right? ISO, NIST, these are voluntary frameworks and they're global frameworks. But I see them playing a huge role because I see a distinction between where law and government and policy needs to come in. A lot of AI risks can be and will be tackled by the market because it is in the market's interest to tackle them. There are several risks that the market itself is incentivized to fix. Something like cybersecurity. Companies aren't doing cybersecurity because a law tells them to. They're doing cybersecurity because a breach affects their bottom line. Right?
Yeah.
Similarly, with AI, companies will start thinking about prompt injections and jailbreaks because it affects them. And for those kinds of problems, I think these frameworks, I think voluntary frameworks, I think contractual negotiations will be enough. We don't need a law for that. Where we do
Okay.
need to think about laws is where it's going to affect an individual, it's going to affect society, and the business has no incentive to fix that,
Yeah.
right? So things like profiling,
True. True.
those are the kinds of examples where I think we need to pay attention.
Yeah, right. Thank you. We have a complementary counterpart to the legal fraternity. And Dhiraj, by virtue of being an engineer and a management graduate from IIM, he looks at AI probably, I'm speculating, but yet he would look at AI probably like a brake in a car. The reason why Dhiraj is able to drive AI faster is because he's got a better brake system in his system. So uh, I'm putting words into Dheeraj's mouth, but then by virtue of what I see his profile, I think there's an apt question here for you, Dheeraj. Among these seven sutras which Avik had flashed, one of them is innovation over restraint. Now, how can Indian startup practically implement the aspect which I was talking about without compensating on the cost factor and putting in investments and exploiting the ability of AI in the Indian scenario per se?
Well, thank you so much, Colonel Binoy, and thanks Shreya and Avik for setting the context. And I was like, I think I would need a little longer time to explain this whole thing because coming from a practitioner who has been a techie at one point in time, chosen to be a revenue and the entrepreneur side of the journey, I can see two aspects. So if we go back 20 years ago, and if you want to build a SaaS company and you are competing against somebody who has $1 billion in cash, they will say, I have a full data center with all the audits and all the security guardrails and everything in place. And the young guy who want to build a SaaS does not have any of those things, right? So for his entry barrier in the business is very high. Then came the cloud, and cloud said, you can set up your entire data center in 5 minutes using my platform, and then you'll be able to launch, a very efficient, website or SaaS product within months. And that is when the word digital transformation was coined, because you are able to use tech to reach to your customers faster than your competitor, is what the true sense of digital transformation bring to the table. Now, let me talk about the fundamentals 101 of AI and the way human child was born, and the day he start talking or he or she start talking, he can differentiate between a cat and a dog, right? This is the classic example that we read when we talk about AI. The moment you ask any ML engine to learn how to differentiate between cat and a dog, and it's a, let's say, a clean slate ML engine, you'll probably have to upload millions of images from every angle for every breed of the dog and cat that exists in the planet for it to be able to categorize that this is a cat and this is a dog, right? Similarly, a lot of these models that exist today are talking about a lot of generic baseline knowledge, which means they can differentiate between boy and a girl, but they for them to differentiate how many similar looking people of like who look like Dheeraj in the world exist. For them, they need to have my personal data, my photos, and the people who look like me in the world to be able to contrast and figure that out. Now, then comes to the cost angle to it, right? So there is one part which is data, the second part is model, and the third part is users, right? We and the models are divided into two parts. One is the small language model, and the other is large language model. We as a country, I don't think so have any large language model that to of a scale of what OpenAI and Anthropics of the world has offered to the world. But we would want to use this AI for our benefits, and sometime a lot of this is, I would say, is FUD, because many times we tend to do things using AI which we can also do as a human, slightly slow but not as fast as AI can do, like for example writing things. But at the same time there is a risk of review, like you may violate certain things, so you would always have to put a human in the loop while you're writing some blogs or essay or things like that. Now, the problem is, first of all, we know the problem. We know exactly, AI, there's a lot of ethic risk and a lot of data training risk and all that. But you can't make AI work without training the models. And for you to train the model, you have to supply the data. Now, half of the world does not even understand what is the difference between open data and sensitive data, and how you are feeding the data to AI. So, and even if I know the difference, definition wise, if I know the definition of what is open data versus what is, uh, how do I ensure that I have the right classification of data at my end? How do I ensure that, because I am not building my business now. It is like most of the enterprises have been doing the business for last 40 years. So they have huge amount of legacy data. They have ambition to use AI. They have a lot of shadow AI. There are a lot of governed and non-governed AI. So the problem is multi-threaded. It's like a tree. Like, every single question that you post, it always have like two answers. One is good, one is bad. The good has ethical side of it, and unethical side of it. The bad also have ethical and unethical side of it. So how do you ensure that all of this can be solved by containing the cost? So the entrepreneurs who are building tech, for those who say that we are 100% reliant on LLM, then the regulators come on and start questioning them, saying that if you're using LLM, which means some point in time you're sending data out of the country, because we don't have any LLM hosted in India, largely. And then when you say I'm using SLM, then they say you have an accuracy problem because there is only so much you can train to the large small language model. So you have to strike the right balance, and that is where, like, a lot of science is required to figure out what can be sent to LLM versus what cannot be sent to it. So knowing it, and then figuring out in your own infrastructure, in your own business context, what you can kind of classify and then differentiate in those aspects. So I'll probably take a pause here. I hope it makes sense, in terms of understanding and making
Yeah,
it practical.
true. In fact, I have a follow-up question rather.
Mhm.
Um, per se, what I have seen in the industry is that people are moving from generative AI to agentic AI, making more meaning out of the AI models that are available there. Simple things like if you even a chatbot call that comes from a bank is now based on agentic AI rather than the legacy model of AI. Now, in those terms, there is a lot of autonomy that the agentic AI demands, per se, by virtue of what it is meant to be doing. Now, there is a threat from the perspective of use of agentic AI. Now, in insofar as the autonomy that is provided to these models, how do you see the problems that may arise, and and should the burden lie with the developer or of the foundational model that is being used by these agencies?
So first of all, I would answer in two parts, sir. One is, do we really need AI for all types of jobs? I'll give you a classic example. A few years ago, I went to one of the largest dairy manufacturer, or the milk product manufacturer in the country, and then I asked, if you use this technology, this is how you will save manpower cost and all of that. And the answer is, the amount of money that I will invest in buying this tech, I would rather employ so many people, and I'm doing a social cause. So why would I need a tech which can replace a lot of human? And a part of my business is creating that goodwill among the humans. So I would not want to replace humans. The same thing applies to agentic side of it also. So today you want agents to do a lot of accurate job like humans without putting human in loop. The problem is, if you ensure that thing that a human is doing on a day to day, for example a telecaller job, agent can do very well, but the cost of running that agentic infrastructure to be accurately doing it, there is a inflection point of break even point. You should have the business and the ROI in a certain value volume to be able to take that hit. But wherein in cybersecurity industry, the industry where I come from, there are billions of threat intel alerts coming from variety of sources, right? And you would want, there is no way human can practically look in those signals
True.
and avoid an attack before it happens. So
Exactly.
you can deploy an agent to a cause which is really worth it, rather than replacing a telecaller agent who is just answer and doing an IVR plus plus kind of a job, right?
Correct.
So that is something which am a very strong opinion of. I have some customers of mine who is a native AI company, and they do voice and accent translation. So an agent sitting in India talking to a customer in US sounds like an American or sounds like an European, uh, would make a lot of business sense, because there is a cost arbitrage game there. Like if they hire an agent there, or there is a voice and accent training they do in India, there is a whole gamut of things that they can save. But what I'm feeling that a lot of funny use cases are coming up, which typically even humans can also do, and the cost of AI versus cost of doing things manually is not justified, and especially in an economy like India. So we have to put AI to the right use.
Right. Thank you very much. I know you have given a perspective from the industry point of view. Shreya, coming back to you, I mean, and as a young professional in the law background, if you would have seen the recent amendment to the IT rules that were done, there was a stringent requirement of 2 to 3 hours takedown clause that was provided in terms of deepfake or contents that are objectionable in that manner. Now, industry presently is not ready for such a environment or such requirement. Now, big the big industries are primarily concerned with the fact that they have to now keep a watchdog over their whatever platforms they have been hosted, and then have an interface. They have a spock between the people who are going to call them, and then to bring down these contents. Now these contents may be relational in nature. Now if you bring down that content, there is a related content or a multiple copy or a repost that has happened. Though there are hurdles there. So do you think that complaints of such nature can be really looked at? And mind you, we don't even have, as what Avik was mentioning, we don't even have a regulatory body or a compliance body from the government of India side. So do you think there is a challenge in this particular clause? And if so, what do you suggest could be the new requirement?
So I mean, I know the industry has also gone back and forth a lot when it comes to this amendment. I think what and where I'm standing right now, and when I'm advising companies, it's really okay, how are you going to take this new law and make it work for you, right? That's where we are today. And I think the risk that you pointed out, and the risk that I see, and that a lot of challenge is based on, is this chilling effect that it will have on content in general, right? If you're asked, if you're a have this if you have this takedown requirement, and b, the big issue I have is intermediaries were not designed to be discretionary. Intermediaries
Exactly.
were not designed to take decisions around what is okay and what is not. Which is why I think when I advise companies today, it really is understand the intent, or sort of glean the intent of what the regulation really is. Understand that your place in this ecosystem is as an intermediary, and operate from that position, right? Think about why the government is really looking at intermediaries as the stakeholder for this, and operate within that. Don't operate beyond that and use discretion. So how can we reduce the discretion of an intermediary as much as possible? I think that will directly affect how much of a chilling effect this actually has on content creation. So I think the risk comes when this brings fear to intermediaries, and where they immediately start to clamp down on content to be able to comply, right? To be able to protect their safe harbor status. What instead I think they should be doing is think about doing this proportionately, right? The IT rules use the terms reasonable and reliable. So what the IT rules are really looking for from intermediaries is a concerted effort and a reasonable effort to be able to put these guardrails in place, right? The second thing is really look at what the rules are asking of you, and where is the risk of the chilling effect actually coming in, right? One is mandatory labeling. This is something a lot of platforms are already doing. There
Yeah.
is a global standard
Yes.
for it that the IT rules prescribe. I
True.
think of that more as infrastructure investment for the rest of your compliances, as opposed to a compliance in and of itself, as it stands today, right? Even your 3-hour takedown, that requires resources. It does not require discretion. This is a requirement that has been in the rules for many, many years. What has happened is that the timeline has been very, very, very reduced, right? And that is what most companies are struggling with. Unfortunately, what this is going to require is a lot of resources, 24/7 teams of legal and engineering to be able to verify an order and take down an order. But what it doesn't require intermediaries to do is take a decision on whether this data should be, or whether this content should be taken down or not. That decision has been taken at the stage of the court or the government. So this is more of an execution issue which requires costs. But what is important for companies to now do is do that red teaming, that tabletop exercise to make sure that they have the protocols in place so that they can meet this 3 hour deadline, right? Where I
Yeah.
see the chilling effect becoming very important is the proactive takedown requirements that intermediaries now have, right? There's a requirement that intermediaries take down synthetically generated content that is violative of the law. If there is a complaint from a user, you have a 2 hour time period to determine whether that complaint is verified, and whether I should take it down. And that's where I think the risk is, because companies, because they have such a short period of time, will now start
True.
automating this whole thing. The moment you
Yeah.
automate it, there will be false positives, and
False.
that's where legitimate content is lost. So
Yeah.
even there, I think having confidence scores, where if your confidence score is high, let the automated sort of decision be made. If there is a medium or low confidence score, have a human reviewer in the loop, right? If you only have 2 hours, do a temporary disablement of the content, let that human review the content, and then decide what to do, right? I think it's about proportionality, and these are the kinds of measures where companies can be creative while still sticking to the bounds of the law, and ensuring that there's no chilling effect, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to go to actually Dhiraj. There is a question that has come that we will address a little later. Now, with respect to what Shreya had mentioned, there is a cost factor that now, because you are part of the AI industry, and do you think that the present status that corporates or enterprises can absorb this cost of this takedown duration and the ecosystem that they have to set to ensure that this happens? There is, in a very short form, can you give us can you throw some
Yeah,
light on
so I think it depends, like, for not for everything that we absorb the, for example, if you look at any delivery ecosystem companies today, their net margins are on thin line, like, because they're doing from door to door pickup and delivery and everything of that sort. For them to, if you increase one half a cent, or if $1 also, as a cost of doing better service, versus something which they say, okay, I'm okay if I lose 10% of the customer, which is industry standard. And then, like, for example, if you look at it, I was just reading some podcast where, uh, I think the Zomato founder mentioned that in Uber Eats versus DoorDash, they divided the whole customer base into two, and then they're kind of not the real competition. In India, Swiggy and Zomato both are okay, and they're letting customer to be on both the platform, and they're not let. So because they're like, may the best player win, and whosoever can serve and deliver faster.
yeah.
So even if you lose a customer today at just for one incident, you may gain it again back. So you would not want to put
And
technology
also
cost.
also for the fact that Indians have short memories.
Exactly. And you don't want to invest, look, on extra 20% on your deal value, just to give an extra customer experience, which that you can like, the memory is short. The moment discount runs away, the customer move from one platform to another platform. So why would you want to invest too much on the technology, where, or so that's a trade-off you have to do. So, but there are certain things that
True.
you cannot avoid. Like, for example, banks. Even if you are loss-making bank, or if you are loss-making NBFC, you regulator forces you, because you are dealing with public money.
Mm.
The regulator forces you to adopt some thing. Now, there is always, like, if you, 1 year down the line, you will hear everybody saying that I want AI, but I want to control the cost of the AI. Because we have seen incident where people buy, they crack an umbrella deal with some of these big AI vendors, saying that we get 1 million or 10 million credits, and the credit run out of the system run out of credit in few months, because they started overutilizing. So there is something called as AI optimization that will come in the picture, where people will
Yeah.
start building smaller models, which will be self-hosted on their infra to do majority of the task, and they will only
Correct.
rely on the larger model for certain niche things which require that kind of.
Yeah.
So right now people are not thinking in all those directions, because it's very early stage, I would say. So
Yeah.
I would say what.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I think one last cent on this is, whatever we do, we have to think from a unit economics mindset also. And then, before we start writing our first line of code in AI, we should be, planning the whole thing in the right, first principle thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful way to sum it up. Sarkar sir, we come back to you by virtue of you working with the Ministry of IT. in policies or on all that. India has never stayed behind the AI journey. In fact, we've got India AI mission, and we've got a secretary level IAS officer who looks after the mission. You would have seen that in the AI Impact India AI Impact seminar, that workshop that event that happened recently. Coming back to the aspect of the use of sovereign AI, when we talk about that, there's a lot of ethic aspects that is around the use of AI and the adoption of AI, especially in India. Now, my question is, when we look at those vulnerable groups who do not have a voice, like the children or disabled people who are not able to use AI to protect themselves, from an ethics perspective, or from what do you expect from the government to bring in a little bit of regulation, especially for this vulnerable group who are going to use AI, especially children? You would have seen that NHRC notice which was just went into the Ministry of IT, questioning the use of AI by children, or employing AI for kids. uh, so, what do you think could be the regulatory landscape looking forward?
Yes, so I think see, sovereign AI is one of the very important aspects that the India AI mission is looking at, and a primary
You're
reason
a,
for the yes, can you
you're a
hear
little
me?
low on volume, Sarkar. Sorry, can
Yes,
you?
yes, can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
Yes,
yes.
and the sovereign AI is a very important aspect that the government is looking at, and that is primarily because of the multilingual nature of the country. We have about 1.4 billion population. Once the census happens in 2027, we'll get an updated number. But as of now, we're looking at 1.7. Out of that, about 200 to 300 million can converse in English like way we are doing in the last 1 hour. The rest are mostly dependent on regional languages, and that is where the large gap lies between the AI haves and the AI have nots. And currently, if you are using any of the large language models, they are primarily relying on translating back to English, getting the answer, and then translating the answer back to the Indian languages. And a big challenge that we also see there is that the data or the corpuses or that is there, they do not always capture the Indian content to a large extent. So they might have a very good collection about, say, Shakespeare or Charles Darwin's novels and poems, but maybe a lot of the linguistic aspects about particular languages, say Gujarati or Punjabi, might not be missed out there. So when we are looking into many of these aspects, and this is a major challenge that we see, because a lot of our local knowledge, then this knowledge exists. This knowledge exists in newspapers. This knowledge exists in among people who are discussing this. Like, say, if the whichever area you come from or we come from, we will have a lot of folk tales that are there, which we used to hear as children. Now, not all of this might be in books which are in digital format, and because of this gap, they are not becoming part of the data sets which needs to be where they needs to be trained into many of those models. So this is a big gap that the Indian government had identified. And India AI mission, the moment it came in shape in 2024, they funded about 20 large language model companies. I think about 5 or 6 in the first year, and another, I think, 10 in 2025. And they were all focused on these aspects, solving the Indian language problem, where they are providing GPU support and many of those things there, and also providing expertise in the regional languages for areas like agriculture. There is a lot of, say, knowledge on agriculture available with the farmers and in the rural areas. The Krishi Vikas Kendras might know about this information, but that information might not be available in digital format, readily available on the internet, and that is where the gap lies. So we are looking at this digital divide that is there, because many of these people might only have a feature phone, they converse on a day-to-day basis. They do not use smartphone on a regular basis. So this is a gap that the government is trying to see. We have seen some early success stories coming up from Sarvam and that IIT Bombay one that is there during the India AI Summit. But I think given this model development takes a good amount of time, when we are looking at, say, the OpenAI and the Chat GPT, it took about, say, 7 to 10 years from their inception to coming up with their models. We expect many of those things to be coming out towards the end of this decade, maybe towards 28, 29, 20, where we will see many more of this investment seeing many of these aspects. I think the second aspect you asked was on the children. I think that's a very important aspect that has come up now in the current discussion, whether kids should be allowed to use AI tools as adults are. So I think a big challenge lies is that the adults themselves are not aware that what they're asking a large language model, the answer is not always a fact-based answer, and it can hallucinate and give you responses. So adults themselves are not aware in many of those skills, because awareness, if you remember, one of the first things that we talked about, awareness is very low about this aspect. We always thought about something coming on the internet as 100% factual, something coming that can be made, that can be fictitious in nature. That mindset is something that will take a few years to get into people's minds, and I think then we will be in a good position to see whether children should be allowed to do that or not. Children tend to pick up things faster than adults, so I think they are smarter, but I think they also have to have that sense of judgment, that whether to cross check the content and how they can cross check the content. We have seen a lot of horror stories of people committing suicide, people taking drastic steps, and these horror stories make you more aware. But there has been some statement by our minister Ashwini Vaishnav on this case. But I think, like many of the other countries like Australia and some of the Scandinavian countries, India has not taken a firm stance yet on whether they will what they will do it for this aspect.
Yeah. Sarkar sir, I have with due regard to the other two esteemed speakers, I have a very academic question, because you come from the academia, and the crowd is quite young today, as we see in our webinar. What what qualifications does one need to imbibe to be able to be part of the journey of AI from a global perspective, and also as an Indian student or Indian prospective academic uh, persuasions that one has to do?
I think that is a very good question and a very relevant one, because as we go about, like today, when we are looking into AI tools, there is a range of AI tools which are helping us becoming productive in various ways. But maybe we use only 5% or 10% of them. You can do your work much better if you use this AI tool. Maybe analyzing your document, creating infographics, creating mind maps and steps. But you should also be aware about what the pitfalls of this thing should be, and what the gaps of such technologies are. So I think adoption of these tools, and more about, say, instead of, say, the academia looking at telling students not to use AI tools, they should encourage them to tell them to use AI tools, but also ensure that using AI tools, you should ensure that certain limits are maintained. Like, say, you can use an AI tool, but there are this plagiarism check tools also can detect whether their content is AI generated or not. You can tell that you can analyze your document and submit your assignments, but the AI generated content should be less than 10%. So they will themselves know, like, how they have to tweak the content, how they have to transform the content to ensure. So also looking from a lot of the input to a lot of the output, and the quality of the output is some of the things that will really matter. So instead of, say, looking at a video where we are looking at it should be AI generated or not, we will measure the video based on the popularity of the video, or the number of likes and the comments the video is getting. So that way, even if something is AI generated but made in a very nice manner, but it is doing the work which is supposed to do, I think we should be fine with it.
Okay, right. Yeah, thank you. Dheeraj sir, I'm going to ask a related question to you. I know by virtue of your presence in the industry, you may be recruiting large number of people or interviewing many people. What are those skills that you are looking at today in terms of AI as an upskilling or a skill that is there among the engineers, management, even for that matter, even if it is a blue collar job? What is the qualities that one as a recruiter you would look on while onboarding personnel in terms of AI knowledge or the AI adoption knowledge?
Uh, for me, I think AI is something which people can learn, but I would rather stick to my first principle hiring. So
Yeah, but do you suggest a formal education, or when you do onboarding, do you look for the skill that one has imbibed?
no, so I think a lot of engineers who reach out to us already share the projects that they have done with the full detail, and I think majority of our discussion that happens revolves around what they have done in the past, and then we go deep and deep and deep into like to be able to figure out that at what point they are using AI to build it, and what point they like AI is handing off to them, and things like that. So that also allows us to figure out how good are they in first principle thinking, and basically they should not be asking a simple basic SQL commands from AI to be able to write that. So I mean, while we would want them to use AI to for their productivity purpose, but then it should not happen that AI create unnecessary loop and then make the whole code slow, and sometimes create unknowns in the thing. So if you're good at first principle
True.
thinking, if your maths is good, I mean, that's why I think the academics is very important at times, because if you're thinking right and you're
Okay.
solving the problem in the right way. Uh, I think we hire from that
Yeah.
point of view.
Thank you. Yeah. Shreya, you represent young India. When I speak to you, I feel young by virtue of your presence in this forum. Yeah. We are all of the mid-level personnel. So I know that by what you spoke, a regulation on AI is not essential. However, responsible AI is what you were emphasizing when you were mentioning about it. Now, from that standpoint, what as a general public one should do to ensure that the available AI is used responsibly by an individual. Forget the government regulations or oversight and things like that. Also, one more question which I would like to ask is that from the very fact that Australia has banned the use of internet, so up to the age of 16, India has been quite magnanimous as what Sarkar was telling. I think there should be an age restriction. So my two question is this: first of all, how do you manage responsible AI as an individual without going behind the prejudice of the regulations and all that? Secondly, is what I asked. Yeah,
Sure,
I
thank
know
you
it's
for
a
that.
tough question to you.
No, on the first one, I think, and I'll speak from experience because I think all of us, responsible AI and AI as a concept is new to everyone. It's not like technology where you have stalwarts who have been around for 20, 30 years and know things and you can look up to them and learn, right? There are people who are very, very experienced, but it's such an evolving sort of area that I think everyone's learning at the same time. Tomorrow there will be agentic, day after there will be something else, and we're all going to have to keep up, right? So even I am a privacy lawyer who is now looking at responsible AI, so I had to upskill myself. And what I tell everyone I meet, and I know you said general public, but what is I think very important is understanding the technology. And as a general public, maybe you don't need to understand it in as much detail as a responsible AI practitioner, but telling people don't use this tool, don't use that tool, this is not safe, that is not safe, I don't think that's a sustainable way to learn about responsibility. I think I learned about responsibility when I understood this is how a model works, this is how an application connects to a model, this is where my data is actually going when I put my data into ChatGPT, right? So even a very basic understanding of what that pipeline looks like, of who is doing what with my data, that's what awareness to me means. Even when we do trainings with companies, we're not telling employees don't put company data into ChatGPT, because tomorrow when it's a different tool, they won't know what the rule is. But if you understand the underlying technology, I think that's when it becomes very obvious to anyone that this is obviously not data I'm going to put in here. This is not data I want the world to see, right? So at a very, very basic level, that's how I think we should be approaching awareness. That's how we should be approaching AI literacy. And to Avik's point, I think companies are not going to be incentivized to spread awareness. So that's another place I think government and civil society needs to really step in, to spread that. I think we need to make the balance even with big tech on one side and citizen awareness on the other, right? That's the only way anything is going to happen. When it comes to an age restriction, you're right, that is a tough question. I don't think India is there yet. And when I think about, I mean, we are introducing certain parallel processes under the Data Protection Act. We're thinking about children's rights separately. I think that's the way to go. I think where is there a high risk to children? When it comes to social media, I'm not sure how that's going to work in a country like India. And I mean in terms of enforceability. I mean in terms of when we think about how we are using phones and internet, sure. But when we think about how rural India is using it, when one family is sharing one phone, I'm not sure how enforceable that's going to be. And I think when we're talking about innovation, and we're talking about young India innovating, I don't know if that's necessarily aligning with national priorities either. I think things like content controls, I think things like age verification for personal data, I think these piecemeal approaches to together protect specific risks to children would make more sense. I think an overall ban is just going to make people find ways around it. So that's just my personal thoughts on this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was such a knowledgeable, and I never knew how 1 hour went by. Kirti, do you have any questions from the audience, please?
We have till now we don't have any questions from the
Okay.
audience, and if our speakers have time, then we can initiate
Yeah,
that as
we
well.
can open up for questions if there's any, or you
Yes,
can place it on the chat for us.
sure.
That would be an ideal way. Oh, I think we don't have any questions as of now. We've been
Yes,
quite
even
exhaustive in giving out everything that is essential. Thank you very
yes,
much, Dheeraj sir. Thank you, Shreya ma'am and Sarkar sir, for those beautiful insight. I know all of you have spoken from your heart and given out without holding back anything that is, that is essentially uh, private in nature. We thank each one of you for giving us this time, and I hope the video goes viral because large amount of sensitive aspects have actually been discussed and told here. Thank you very much, and I think we wind up now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
thank
much.
you, everybody.